It's October half term, and we know what that means. Holiday prices double, sometimes triple at this time. But it is still possible to find a cheap deal and get away for a few days. Let's go. When you arrive in Belfast, head out of the airport opposite to where it says departures, and you will see a bus which takes you into the city centre. You can get a ticket for £13.50 for an open return. Now, first things first, as it was still early, we couldn't check in. We headed to Neighbourhood to the viral brunch spot. I got pancakes, Haley got Turkish eggs, and it was a fairly solid breakfast. Now, as we just arrived and it was the first day, I was super keen to see some sights. So we headed down, had a quick look at City Hall, and headed over to the Europa Hotel, which is the most targeted hotel in Europe. Now, seeing as we've seen the Europa Hotel, I figured we may as well stay on this trend. So we headed down to see some sights from the Troubles. The first place we stopped at was the Divis Tower. This is the last remaining part of the Divis complex, and during the Troubles, the British Army actually occupied the top 2 floors of this building. Then we moved on to St Congle's School, a little bit further down on the Falls Road, and if you walk up close to the building and take a close look, you can still see bullet holes. Then we carried on a little bit further down the Falls Road, and the next stop was the Bobby Sands mural. Bobby Sands went on hunger strike for 66 days, and he was the first of 10 to die in the 1981 hunger strikes. Then we headed a bit further down the road onto Bombay Street. Now, back in 1969, Troubles started getting a lot worse and become more widespread across the city. And on the 15th of August 1969, there was an attack on this street where residents' houses were burnt down. Due to the attacks getting worse across the city, the British Army decided to build the Peace Walls. These walls were built to separate the Catholic and Protestant communities. Then we headed over to Northumberland Street. This part is known as the Peace Gate, which also separates both communities. And back in the day, this would have been used as a checkpoint. When you cross through this gate, you're heading towards the Shankill Road part of the city. The weather started to turn on us a little bit as we got over to this side of the city, but we still had a bit of a wander around the estates and had a look at the murals. So if you head into Victoria Square Shopping Centre, go right to the centre and look up, you'll see a lift and also some stairs spiralling up. If you follow these stairs all the way up, it brings you out to a platform with a glass dome-shaped roof. And this area gives you great views over the city of Belfast for no cost at all. So, quick accommodation tour. We stayed in the Cathedral Quarter. This room cost us £200 for the 3 nights. It was very cosy, but it was nice and clean and it did the job, and breakfast came included in the price. The only thing left to do on our first night in Belfast was to freshen up, get out and sample some of Ireland's finest. The next morning we got up, headed out, had a quick look at the Albert Memorial Clock, then the Big Fish, and then we headed over the bridge to go to the Titanic Museum. The pathway is clearly marked and it takes around 20 minutes to get over. Price of entry into the experience was $26.95 per adult, and it was definitely worth it. However, it was super busy. At some stages in the experience you couldn't even move, but it was really interesting learning about the history of the Titanic and learning about the history of the people of Belfast who built it. And you can still go out to the shipyard where the actual Titanic was built. It's also really interesting looking at what the rooms would have been like for the passengers on board. I think if you come into Belfast, this experience is a must visit. Then we headed back into the city and over to Crumlin Road Jail to where McConnells Distillery is now placed. The price of the distillery tour was £25 per adult. It included samplings of 3 whiskies and a tour of the distillery which lasted around an hour. And I'm more of a bourbon guy myself, but this whiskey was super nice. Now, I've been to a few distilleries in my time, but never one as good as this in terms of how it looked. Being in the old jail just gave it so much character. Once we left the distillery, we headed down and had a few drinks in the famous and super good looking Crown Bar. The next morning we both had the same idea, and that was to head out of the city and see Giant's Causeway. So we headed down to Belfast Grand Central Station and jumped on the train to Coleraine. The train ticket cost £24 for a return, and it took just over an hour. You can then get a bus from Coleraine up to the Giant's Causeway, and that costs around £5 per way, so £10 return. When you arrive, just walk around the side of the National Trust Centre and follow the road down. There's plenty of maps along the way showing you the different routes you can walk. Luckily for us, the weather just held off, and I'm so glad we came here because this place was unbelievable. When we made it back to Belfast, we went out for a couple of drinks and listened to some live music. This is our last day and we didn't actually fly till later on in the afternoon, so we had a few hours to kill, and the first thing we did was check out the City Hall. Then once we did that, we headed down and had a look at the university campus, then made our way through the Botanic Gardens and to the Ulster Museum, which is free to enter. Once we finished in the museum, we made our way to the airport and jumped on the flight back to sunny Manchester. If you've got any questions about this trip, drop them in the comment section below. Thank you for watching.